when people talk about stretching, we think about, oh, we're always stretching just our muscle tissues, but our body is one system, and fascia is the environment that all of our other systems live within. So when we stretch something, we're not just stretching our muscles, we're not just gliding our nerves, we're also taking care of our soft tissue in that process too. And what he was discussing was this stress relaxation response and how fascia is actually the first tissue that limits the elongation of tissue.
Welcome to the Fascia-Informed Therapist podcast, designed for health and wellness practitioners interested in fascia science. I'm Amy Mayer, occupational therapist, practice owner, author, and educator with more than 30 years of experience using fascia techniques across many settings. Each episode brings practical insights and thought-provoking conversations to help you expand your skills and better serve your clients. Let's get started. Hi, this is Amy, and this is another edition of the Fascia-Informed Therapist. And today we're talking with Maddie to hear about her experience at the Fascia Research Society. We've already talked to Caitlin, and now we're going to get Maddie's perspective. Welcome, Maddie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Yay. So what made you decide that you wanted to go? Because you're fresh out of school, and it could be a lot. Why did you decide to go?
It seemed like the opportunity presented itself. I had already been curious about the research because working with you and Caitlin, it's really inspiring. You keep up to date with everything current, and the way you talk about these researchers and finding the new things that they have coming out. Mm-hmm. And to hear that a conference that only takes place every, 3 years is all of a sudden going to be in the U.S., whereas we don't know where it could be 3 years from now. I saw opportunity to take advantage of that and take advantage of some student pricing, which I purchased before graduation.
I didn't even realize they had student pricing, so that's super awesome.
Yeah, it was a great overlap between money, time, and opportunity that I had. Okay. So I figured, why not take a chance, do something I'm curious about, and get to go with a colleague that I really respect down there to really learn and understand these new concepts and see the pilot research that's coming out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So hit some highlights on the conference. Like what sorts of things stood out to you the most?
The keynote speakers were phenomenal. And it was really neat to see the wide breadth of professions that were represented there. Not only did we have medical doctors, anesthesiologists, we had physical therapists present, we had PhDs, we had yoga teachers and breathwork professionals and body workers. And it was really neat to see how this kind of hodgepodge array of professions all aligned to see and be curious about what new stuff was coming out regarding something that they work with on the daily basis. Mm-hmm. I really thought that the keynotes blew me away. I can be a little bit, I'm going to use the word critical, but I don't think that's exactly.
Well, you're a critical thinker, so critical's fine.
Yeah, I think critical has a negative connotation sometimes when it comes to, hearing someone else speak about something.
In the scientific world, critical is good. You should always look at everything with a critical eye, and that doesn't mean negative. It means you're assessing, you're evaluating it. How does it fit into your understanding of the world and what you're doing? So I totally get where you're coming from, but I think you're coming from the right place.
I also think I'm coming from the right place.
To say, I guess. But
it's really neat because, when you hear someone speak, we're conditioned to be like, yes, this is awesome. I love this. Fabulous. And I think going through the throes of academia where they really send you through the ringer with research courses, and you learn about critical analysis of research, and you learn to be skeptical in a healthy way about what you're hearing and seeing.
Yes.
It changes your perspective of someone's presentation of their work. And when you see people present something that is with their own healthy dose of skepticism, I would say, when they're able to communicate their healthy dose of skepticism to people that may not know that that is something that they should have, because it's exciting. You see a piece of research and you're like, yes, we have a bias. We have a cognitive confirmation bias where we see a piece of pilot research and we get excited about it. We think, oh my goodness, this confirms everything that I see and do and feel. And then you see the research has an N of 3. And it's exciting. It's exciting to be excited about something that's coming out that could have an impact on what you do and what you are able to tell your clients about. And it's nice to be able to look at that and hear from the person presenting a pilot research that, this is in the first throes of it. We have a long way to go with seeing if these two things are aligned, or if this is a correlation, or even in the future have like more causative, connections. But it's really cool to see that healthy dose of skepticism be present and have that be communicated in the fascia world, where there's a lot of negative connotation about the voodoo of working with this body system.
It makes me think about the difference between evidence-based and evidence-informed. And back when I was thinking about what to name this podcast, what to name this continuing education piece of what I'm doing, I ended up going with Fascia-Informed because we don't have a ton of solid research that's going to definitely say this is going to happen when we do this. But when we know enough about the system itself and are starting to see things evolving and how people are looking at and studying things, that begins to inform us in our thinking about what direction perhaps we can go.
And I think I come back a lot to the concept of who we are. We are doctors of occupational therapy. And I think people get confused when we hear us call ourselves doctors. And it's fun for me because when they're like, oh, well, I guess not a real doctor. And I kind of have to laugh because that gives me an opportunity to explain to them, like, well, the word doctor comes from the Latin word docere, which translates to teach. And I think that really highlights our role in this profession, along with what we do to help people's pain. Our role is to teach. And our role is to help the public understand things that they may not be privy to, and to communicate this research and this evidence to people who aren't able to do that themselves, or don't have access to the research, or to as deep of an understanding that we have. And I think that really extends our role. And we talk about education a lot in the terms of safety in occupational therapy, but communicating research as well. You don't have to be a professor to do that with the people that you see.
Right. I love that. Yes. We could go down a good tangent right here. Okay, let's go back to and I wanted to remind people too, in case you didn't listen to Caitlin's podcast, the podcast with Caitlin, that the OT representation at that conference was basically you and Caitlin, right?
I know, we were there representing.
The 1%.
It's a lot of room for opportunity for growth in that area. And it's something I would love to communicate with the Fascia Research Society in the future, because when you register for the conference, you register under a certain profession, and occupational therapy was not even listed in the professions offered
to choose from,
which I think is bananas, but shows opportunity to advocate for our field and to be present in every room where we are discussing healthcare. Another opportunity to advocate for OT as a whole, and that we are here. We deserve our place at the table, and we have so much to offer, because it seemed like every session that I went to at this conference was talking about function. And I remember looking at Caitlin and being like, we need more of this. We need more of us in this space. This is our bread and butter. Like, this is us. We belong here learning about this stuff. And if our scope of practice is going to be discussed here, why isn't this more known in the OT community?
Sure. Well, trying. Hopefully come March when the book is published.
We're working on it.
More OTs will be purchasing that and reading it and going, wow, I need to know more.
I will say to those listening, I have had a glimpse at the first few chapters of this book, and you're in for a treat. You're in for a treat.
I did gather a little feedback from my trusted sources here. Okay, cool. Thank you for the plug. Okay, back to the Fascia Research Conference. So, which keynote really stood out to you the most?
So there were a couple. Like I
Okay,
said, I
sure.
really was inspired by each one that I heard, and they offered something different every day, which is the coolest part. Sometimes you go to a conference and you see the same material presented the same way 12 different times, and each time you're hoping for something different. There, however, I got the perspectives from people of a whole bunch of different professions, but the most exciting one, I would say, and it's hard to choose because they're all exciting, it came from someone who did not work directly in healthcare. It came from a guy named Dr. Mark Driscoll, and he's a PhD and professor of engineering at McGill University. And to hear his perspective on the fascial system and the mechanics of it and the research that he's been doing, especially on thoracolumbar fascia and fascia thickness, was really interesting. He essentially has this lab where he had challenged his students to create almost like a weightlifting belt. And he was the first person to say, that's not my favorite piece of technology. I'm not really a big fan of weightlifting belts. We won't get into that, but he challenged his students to create one that had different properties, that had the ability to tighten to support the core when someone bent over and to loosen when they stood back up. So essentially to provide core support through increasing abdominal pressure as someone bent over. Now, as an OT, I'm listening to this going, oh, I've got ideas for this. I'd love to see this in practice. I'd love to see this with my clients. But his application of fascia, he was looking at the thickness of the thoracolumbar fascia. And if those listening aren't as familiar, it's this really massive piece of fascia along our mid to lower back. And it provides a lot of support for all of our functional activities that include bending, lifting, twisting, anything that involves what we do with our daily lives, from carrying in our groceries to picking up our children. And so it was really interesting hearing his perspective on this, because what he found in his research was that the thickening of the thoracolumbar fascia, it keeps pressure sensation from getting to our muscle tissues. So if our thoracolumbar fascia is thickening because there's too much pressure coming in from outside forces, we talk often about gravity being those forces in our practice. If that fascia thickens too much, it decreases sensation in the muscles, and the muscles atrophy. And so we can see this kind of chain reaction where the muscles atrophy, the fascia stiffens, and we have a decrease in the lordotic movement, the movement of our low back, essentially, which means we end up using more of our thoracic spine to bend forward compared to our lumbar spine. And then we wonder why someone's looking like a candy cane coming in saying, my back and neck hurt. So that was really interesting to see his research on that, and to, have that supported conclusion from someone who doesn't even work in healthcare the way that we do.
Right.
It's really neat to get a perspective from someone outside of the therapeutic realm, out of the rehab area space. And that was a really exciting one, to get a perspective like that.
Yeah, I think that's always been something that's been fun for me for the last couple decades, as I've been learning all about all these things, is to look outside of occupational therapy for all this great information that can influence how we think.
This episode of the Fascia-Informed Therapist is brought to you by me. I offer Fascia-Informed CE for health and wellness practitioners, both online and in person. Whether you're looking for flexible self-paced courses or hands-on in-person workshops, you'll find evidence-based practical tools you can apply right away in your practice. Visit fasciainformed.com to explore upcoming offerings and take your next step as a fascia-informed therapist.
Okay, Maddie, well, what other keynotes were of interest?
One of the other ones that I thought was fascinating was the presentation from Dr. Antonio Stecco. His presentation was titled The Biomechanics of the Fascial System. I know you and I have discussed my love for sports, for watching them, for playing them, and for occupational therapy's role in that. Not just in fine motor, but in supporting the fascial system for sports performance. One of the things they discussed was fascia's role in explosive movements and movements of daily activity. And explosive movements, things like sprinting, we've previously discussed that this is also a functional movement. You talked about chasing after your grandkids.
Very explosive sometimes,
very
jumping off the floor, chasing them down before they get to the street, whatever, yeah.
And wanting to do that throughout the lifespan, too.
Yes.
Often, as we get older, when we are not in the roles where we have to do those things anymore, we do not perform explosive movements as often. And that can be detrimental to not just our fascial system, but our muscle systems and our bones. But one of the neat things was he was discussing how explosive movement, having stiff fascia can actually help with certain types of explosive movements, which was interesting to me because we talk a lot about warming up before our exercises and things like that. But it changes my perspective when it comes to, say, athletics and what the role for stiff fascia is in athletic performance and whether or not preconditioning before certain types of athletic performance or before seeing your grandkids could all be used in practice and could be recommended for performing those types of things. But they also talked about daily activity, and this is everything that we do with our day, from going to the bathroom to getting our groceries and putting them away to preparing meals, light activity that requires smooth gliding movements. They found that preconditioning is actually really beneficial to the fascia system. And so even after warm-up, they found that the mechanical properties of fascia still remain constant. So stiff fascia, even after a warm-up, can be beneficial for explosive movements. So we think about the bodies of athletes and how they tend to recover if their fascia is thickened because of their performance and because of those fast movements that they're doing, those explosive movements. I know we've talked a little bit about differences in fascial tissue based on lineage. We've talked about the Viking and the temple dancer at times and how someone's history would determine the thickness of their fascial tissue and how much friction is needed during movements to keep them warm.
But can we pause here for a second
Yes.
and just talk about the whole concept of stiffness?
Yes.
Because I think in our culture, our society, we tend to say if I feel stiff, that's stiff is bad. And I think what Antonio Stecco was trying to communicate is that stiffness is good. And that was a little bit of a confusing word when I was first starting to read the literature. And in my own head, stiffness is bad. But in the case of fascia, stiffness can be very, very important. We don't want it to be too loose and too lax. And then we end up with EDS or other connective tissue disorders. So we don't want things to be too lax. We want them to be lax enough that we can move and glide, as you just said. Everything can glide. But stiffness is important to hold us up against gravity. Stiffness is important for the case of rebounding type movements, jumping, that athletes might need, that explosive running. Stiffness is extremely important to protect the body and allow it for performance. So I just wanted it to be clear for everybody that stiffness can be really good and important, but that can be a confusing word when you read it in the literature.
Yeah, I really appreciate you making that clarification also, because that could be confusing for some people, like you said. there's a lot of negative connotation when you say, oh, I'm feeling stiff. That's always, never, no one's saying they feel stiff and it's a good thing.
Yes, there can be too much stiffness in the fascia for
Yes.
sure. It's all about balance.
Speaking of balance, I'd like to talk about what he was discussing with stretching also.
Yes.
So stretching is this form of applied strain that we offer not just to our muscles, but to our fascia as well. I think when people talk about stretching, we think about, oh, we're always stretching just our muscle tissues, but our body is one system, and fascia is the environment that all of our other systems live within. So when we stretch something, we're not just stretching our muscles, we're not just gliding our nerves, we're also taking care of our soft tissue in that process too. And what he was discussing was this stress relaxation response and how fascia is actually the first tissue that limits the elongation of tissue. So when we're doing a quick stretch just to make sure we're loose prior to athletic performance, it's not really our muscles that we're giving that input to. It's our fascia.
Now, I thought it was his sister, Carla Stecco, that produced that research. Did he give her any credit?
I don't know if he did. I don't recall.
I may be mistaken myself. It was a Stecco one way or the other.
Well, he may have been presenting it, but it could have been a collection of
Sure.
research
They
from
do quite a bit.
the team.
Yep.
I know they've collaborated in the past. So
How was the listening to the accent, the Italian accent?
I'm from Minnesota, so I sometimes have an issue with accents and understanding them. I
okay.
even listen to all my shows with subtitles because it's tricky.
I just thought when I went, it was fun to listen to all the different accents of the presenters because you were listening to people from around the world. So,
Yes.
Cool.
And it was neat. I didn't have a difficult time necessarily understanding him, and his slides were really well done, so it was easy to follow what he was saying.
Sure. Yeah. Very, very bright. Very interesting, bright person. Yeah.
Yeah. So hearing his conclusions that fascia is really the major target of any sort of static stretching that we do, that really changed my perspective, especially when looking at athletics and the things that I like to do and watch. It's neat to apply these things to what I do.
I'm just going to throw a few other things in there that are popping into my head that I can't tell you exactly who did this research when, but I could easily find it. Too much elongation prior to athletic endeavors can actually decrease our ability to tap into our proprioception. So we don't want to do too much deep stretching before something like that. Rather, to best prepare is more like bouncy, rebounding type movements.
Especially to keep our fascia healthy and crimped, too. That kind of
Yes.
stress relaxation cycle to really, what's the word I'm looking for here? Idealize? Optimize. There it is. Optimize the crimping in our fascial tissues so those movements are smooth, gliding, and potentially explosive for the activities we need to be explosive for.
Yes, and the 30-minute class that I teach online on Fridays, over the past year or so, I've been incorporating a little more bouncy type movements into that class, and most of the people that attend that are retired folks, but I think it's really important for them, even though they're probably not going to do a lot of explosive type movements, just knowing who my crowd is. But it helps to maintain that crimp, and the most important reason for them to have that is the quick reactive type of movements. Like if you catch your toe on something and you need to be able to move your leg quickly and catch yourself, that would be the kind of explosive movement they would need.
And that also brings in mind that I need to work on this also. Even as a person who's younger, I know we discussed how on Easter I tripped and sprained my toe, and if I was just a tad faster, perhaps I could have prevented a bit of injury in that way. So it's not just for people who are mature. This is for people of all ages.
Absolutely.
From kids, because, as children, we start sitting at a desk very young. and our fascia becomes less stretchy and less stretchy over time if we're not caring for it. So not just for mature people, not just for adults, also for young people, young adults, children.
A true, if you don't use it, you lose it scenario, for sure. Okay, what else do you have for us?
One of the other keynotes was, interestingly, from a man named Dr. Werner Klingler, and he's an anesthesiologist, and he was discussing, he was actually filling in. We were supposed to hear a keynote from Dr. Neil Teese, and
that would have been awesome, too.
It would have been awesome, too. And unfortunately, there was an issue with getting Neil to the conference. So in awesome doctor leader fashion, Dr. Klingler stepped up to provide this amazing keynote, which was very funnily titled Fascia and Voodoo. Oh. Which is this interesting, combination, as you've discussed in the past, that people would often ask what kind of voodoo that you're doing when you do the techniques that you do to affect the fascial system. But he was talking about a lot of the physiology behind it, and he came up with two really big concepts that stuck with me. The first was that fascia is there to keep enzymes happy. So in his perspective,
say more. Interesting.
So he talked a lot about water content in our bodies and pH levels. And he talked about for every 1 degree higher that our body temperature is, our enzyme activity increases by 10%. So when we talk about like chemistry and physics, water has a really high specific heat. So for when you increase water content, you're able to hang on to heat a little bit better. So when you're a baby, if you ever feel a baby, babies are they're little tiny heaters. But they're also mostly water. Maybe that's why they're so squishy and fun to squeeze. But muscle twitch is also temperature dependent. So these enzymes that work with our body for excitation and contraction coupling reactions, our fascia mitigates and works with those enzymes. So the fascia relationship with our muscles, with muscle contraction, is so much closer than what we understand, and really connected to hydration in ways that we discuss here at Mayor Wellness. But we need to make sure that the community understands that importance of a hydration. And as we get older, the water content in our bodies diminishes. It goes from 75 to 80% as an infant to just 50% when you're a senior. So we couple that with dehydration. We're not getting the signals to our muscles for excitation, for muscle activation, contraction, and reactions. So we want to make sure that those enzymes are kept happy with healthy, hydrated fascia.
What an interesting connection. Wow. Huh.
It blew my mind, but it gets better. It also talked about...
Okay.
It also talked about how fascia can help keep neurotransmitters happy. And we talk about there's known fascial alterations in people who have conditions such as Parkinson's or depression or history of, say, amphetamine intakes. So when we talk about keeping neurotransmitters happy, we think about connections between those three things. Depression having effects on the brain that lead to impairments in functional abilities. We talk about Parkinson's and dopamine in the brain. When we talk about amphetamine intake, which we think about people with ADHD, and they're using amphetamines to regulate their nervous system and have a greater executive function, so they're able to function more effectively at their job, at work, at school, all of those things. So we look at fascia as being something that could be very connected to neurotransmitters in the brain. And we already know there's fascia within forms of our nervous system. We know that it goes from the bottoms of our feet into the meninges of our spine, and it really is the environment throughout it all. But the correlations between fascial alterations and conditions that affect the brain and therefore go back and affect the body, really interesting to me. But he also talked about when we think about common sense. This man was very funny. Maybe that's why I liked his presentation so much. But he discussed people saying something is common sense. It often misguides us when we're learning and trying to advance knowledge. And he talked about that burning witches was once a form of common sense too. And look how wrong we can be.
Right.
But we look back and, our experience is mitigated by what we know right now. Yeah. That's the coolest part about scientific advances, current research, and not knowing what we're going to know 10 years from now.
Right.
And how having a biased against new things coming out because, common sense just simply does not explain what's happening. And that maybe one day we'll have the science to explain the voodoo. We'll have the technology to study it and understand it better. And the voodoo all of a sudden becomes something we understand and can substantiate scientifically. And it's those types of perspectives that really give me a lot of hope for the future, that it's okay to not understand everything right now. And it's okay to have some healthy critical thinking and a dose of skepticism, but also hope and curiosity that one day we'll have technology to explain phenomena that we are seeing as practitioners. When we have that knowledge of we see something that works and we may not be able to explain it, but we know that it works. We know that our clients get a benefit from it. That hope that we get to see those connections later on gives me hope as a practitioner, and a lot of excitement too. Look at where our field is going to grow into, and look at all that's going to come out. I'm inspired. I'm thrilled by it.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
Yes, it makes me think back to 34 years ago now when I first learned myofascial and fascia targeting techniques and how it made absolutely zero sense to me. And, look at where we are now. And then I'm thinking about where you are at the start of your career and then where you might be when you're my age. I mean, it's very exciting. Very exciting. Is there anything else you would like to share about the conference?
Sure. There was one pilot study that really stuck out to me and was exciting. There was a group of researchers from Taiwan that was looking at, excuse me, they had a very small group of participants in this pilot study, but they were all adolescent and teenage young women. And the participants in the study had something they referred to as banana knee, which I'd never heard it referred to it that way, but it's essentially when you're standing, a hyperextension of the knee. So your knee has that kind of banana pattern in it from hyperextending your knee. Well, this group of participants also all happened to have really bad menstrual pain. So what they were looking at in the research was techniques of biofeedback to affect the fascial tissue as a means of treating the banana knee and fascial pelvis tightening, because their theory was that the strain on the knee was causing tightness in the pelvis, which was contributing to menstrual pain. So by addressing the tightening in the fascial pelvis and addressing posture and alignment with the knees and with how they stand and how they walk, at the end of the study, they had some really great results, really promising results for treating menstrual pain. A correlation was formed that by using this biofeedback technique and addressing posture and alignment, there was a reduction in menstrual pain in this population. Again, very small group of participants, but it's exciting to see things like that. It's exciting to see that type of research being done, and it makes me even more excited to see what a larger study, what a larger randomized control trial in the future would yield for the results. I'm interested to see these correlations already being built in the international community.
Is that study published? Or are they presenting something that hasn't been published yet?
I think it was not published yet.
Okay.
I would have to double check. I think I was just caught in the excitement of it all. I forgot to ask.
Well, I mean, sometimes they say, please don't share too much because it's not published yet. But That's exciting for me because I've worked with so many women with menstrual pain, and when we talk about posture and we talk about tightness, and it's just your fascia's not giving your body enough space to expand in the way that it naturally and normally does during that time of the month, or maybe it's expanding more than it needs to because you've got a baseline of inflammation in your body that is higher than it should be. See, all those little things should get people's brains beginning to churn. It doesn't, as you said, it's a pilot study, but it should be making people think.
Yes. And even though this pilot study is working with young women, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is not applicable information to men also. If we think about where fascial tightness in the pelvis manifests in men, think about instances of sciatica.
Sciatica, erectile dysfunction, they have pelvic floor pain as well. I mean, men and women tend to tuck their tailbones and have that posterior pelvic tilt, but I see it way more in men over the years. Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. Anything else? Keep going. I'm loving this.
So looking at research that, applies to young women doesn't necessarily mean that it couldn't be a seed to future research that also looks at how these things affect young and old men too. But love to see it. Love to see researchers out there presenting their work and getting to see and understand these things from an occupational therapy perspective. So important. But seeing this stuff reminds me a lot of, are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yes.
This form of... Oh,
go ahead. Please describe it.
So the Dunning-Kruger effect is essentially this form of cognitive bias where people who are new to a subject tend to really overestimate their understanding.
Yes.
And their their confidence in understanding something. And I definitely had this experience when I got into OT school because I was on what they call it the peak of Mount Stupid, when you know just enough to feel that you're really smart about something.
Yes.
And then once you realize all this information that you don't know, all the information that there is to know, you kind of dip into the valley of despair, they call it.
Yep.
But it's not somewhere you stay. You keep learning, and you eventually climb up what they call the slope of enlightenment, and then the plateau of sustainability. So if you are a fascia-curious person, and you are going from the peak of Mount Stupid for... where it's really exciting and you feel like you know so much, and then all of a sudden you feel like there's so much out there and you don't understand it, your slope of enlightenment is coming along the way. And when I got to the Fascia Research Congress, I felt at the peak of Mount Stupid. I felt really confident. I had been, working with you and Caitlin for a while, and I was like, I know so much more than people think I may know about this subject, and I'm excited to talk about it. And then you hear new stuff coming out.
Right.
And it's inspiring, and it's cool. And then you go into that valley of despair, and you're like, oh, I don't know as much as I think I know. But that valley of despair it's okay to be there. Because there's a point to recognizing how much you know and how much you don't know. And isn't that competence, knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know?
Yes. Yeah, I think about how much I've learned in the past 30-some years, but it's a function of the more you know, the more you realize that you really don't know. And the exciting part of this too is the more that I know is yet to be discovered and yet to be more fully understood. Yeah, that's exciting. That's fun to bring up. Thanks.
Yeah. And I have one more thing I guess we'll leave the end of the podcast on. This is kind of silly, but bear with me. I got thinking about seeing all this new research and going back to the beginning of the podcast, that healthy dose of critical thinking, of skepticism, and using my research knowledge to really distinguish what is information that I can use and what is information that I should, be skeptical of and wait for more information to come out about. So I thought about this. I thought that seeing new research should be like getting on a dating app. Understand that everyone new and interesting, and every new and interesting thing that you see is not always going to be something significant.
That's so good.
I know that's kind of silly,
But some of them are.
but some of them are. And isn't that the fun part about both dating and new data?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, Maddie, so fun. This was really, really fun. Any other? That was a good final.
I'd been saving that. I thought you'd like it.
So I think I can't remember if I've talked about this on the podcast yet or not, but Maddie has joined our little team here at Mare Fascia Wellness and is beginning to see clients, and we're really excited about that.
I'm so happy to be here. This
Yeah.
is such a wonderful place to be. You have the best clients.
We do. Have
I get
great
to
clients.
be a part of that. And we're just getting started. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's really fun adding. The three of us kind of think a lot alike, but think very uniquely in a lot of ways too. So I'm really, really pleased to have your uniqueness brought into our little group.
My irreverence.
I already have some of that, and you're just adding to it.
We need a little.
Yes.
We need a
yes,
little.
we
That's
definitely
okay.
like to make it fun and enjoyable, and I think our clients appreciate the atmosphere that we create.
It's certainly relaxing, and I appreciate that, not just as a worker, but as someone who would get services here in the future also.
Yeah.
It's an environment that I like to be in.
Cool. Okay, all right, listeners, please take a moment to hit the like or the subscribe or whatever your format has. Make a comment that helps other people find the podcast and help us spread the word about fascia so more people can integrate it into their practice. All right, have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
You've been listening to the Fascia-Informed Therapist podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes. And if you'd like to go deeper, check out my continuing education courses, both online and in person. You can find them at fasciainformed.com. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to next time.